Welcome back to On to the Next Thing. I'm Michael, your host. Today is September 1st, so happy Labor Day. And that means that today is our very spooky Labor Day special, where I'm going to be talking about all of the horror literature and horror movies that I've been forgetting to talk about or didn't have time to talk about the last couple episodes. But before we do that, we have to, as usual, get right into bird news. All right, first bird headline. Let's pull it up here. This one's from Vale Daily. I don't know what Vale Daily means. But okay. More than 3.5 million birds migrated over Colorado in one night this week. Residents are being asked to turn out their lights to help them. So this is, I guess, a public service announcement for Colorado. In Colorado, the peak bird migration starts on September 1st, today, and continues through September 24th, according to Birdcast. And this is written by Ryan Spencer. Coloradians are being asked to dim their lights to aid millions of birds flying over the state each night amid the annual fall migration. Every year, billions of birds migrate north in the spring and south in the fall. Nearly 80% of birds that migrate do so at night, often navigating by starlight, according to the National Audubon Society. However, artificial light from humans can disorient the birds, throwing them off their migration path and sometimes causing them to collide with buildings or windows. Artificial lights are a big problem for them, Richard O'Brien, the chair of Lights Out Colorado, said in an email. They have an amazing journey, sometimes thousands of miles to South America. It's time to remind our neighbors, turn out unneeded outdoor lights each night for at least the next month. Just as an aside, I've heard about the Lights Out organization, and yeah, I don't think it's just in Colorado, but yeah, don't keep all those big outdoor spotlights on. Fucks with the birds. Screws up their migration. There's a bunch of different ways that birds navigate, but one of them is through the night sky and different light patterns from, different natural light patterns and natural light sources like the sun and the stars. So if you have extra lights in there, it kind of screws them up, and that even if it delays them, that's not good if they're trying to get to a certain feeding or breeding ground by a certain time. So yeah, basically that's about all this article is going to say. Yep, bird migration, skyscrapers. Yeah, they'll be flying into buildings. And here's a quote. One study estimates the building collisions kill as many as 1 billion birds in the U.S. each year. So yeah, and if they get drawn to the artificial lights, and they'll fly right into buildings. So yeah, make sure you turn off your fucking lights. Save those birds. What else we got here? Agree and close. This is from Euronews. Bird watchers flock to Colombia and South Africa. So why are Venezuela and DRC being left behind? This was not the article that I thought it was going to be. This is about the headline that I saw was about bird watching helping the tourism in certain countries. But I'm guessing that it helps a lot of these countries when you have rare birds and you have well-off tourists coming in just to watch the birds. So I guess this is looking into kind of the disparities between certain countries. Now, I can think of a number of reasons why Venezuela and the Democratic Republic of the Congo would be left behind as opposed to Colombia and South Africa. But let's see what reasons they have going into it. While birdwatching tourism explodes in countries like Colombia and Costa Rica, places like Madagascar and Bolivia are seeing far fewer bird lovers. Madagascar, okay, they mentioned like 6 different countries so far. So this is going to get a little bit confusing, but you're gonna have to work with it. Birdwatching tourism has exploded in the last decade, mainly because of the increasing desire for sustainable outdoor travel, which provides a deeper connection with nature. Other factors such as this is written with AI because it loves to do like the whole like, hey, let's talk about this and this. Although that was also how I was taught how to write essays as a human being. You start with like some general statements about bird watching as an introduction. But now it's almost impossible to tell because between a mediocre writer and a AI mediocre writer. Anyway, new research from the University of California, Santa Cruz, using data from the eBird app, analyzes birdwatching tourism growth across 155 countries, as well as the sociological and ecological factors affecting it. The study found that 4 major factors influence birdwatching tourism: the number of small-range bird species, total bird biodiversity, the Global Peace Index, and the Human Development Index. The results: birdwatching tourism benefits may be disproportionately concentrated in only a few global destinations. Colombia and South Africa, top birdwatching tourism destinations. They have great sustainable, blah, blah, blah. They already said, yep. As many of these countries are usually underdeveloped economically, tourism revenue can have a far-reaching impact, especially in rural areas. Colombia is one such example of a country which has seen a positive impact from birdwatching tourism. The country had 40 times more overall birding days reported in 2022 than in 2010, according to eBird data. It's also the top spot for birdwatching tourists from 2010 to 2022. We've long wondered about birdwatching as a way to achieve both conservation and economic development. Over the years, we've seen Colombia really explode as a birdwatching destination, and we often ask ourselves why more countries aren't similarly recognized as a great place for birdwatching. Natalia Ocampo-Penuela, the lead author of the new UC Santa Cruz study, said. The second most frequented destination for birdwatchers from 2010 to 2022 is South Africa. Other countries across Western Europe and Canada had a disproportionately high number of visitors compared to their bird capital, which is the number of bird species in the region. Countries like Mexico, Costa Rica, Peru, Brazil, Ecuador, and Australia both had high levels of bird capital as well as high visitor numbers. On the other hand, other tropical countries like Venezuela, Democratic Republic of Congo, Bolivia, Madagascar, and Papua New Guinea had disproportionately few birdwatching tourists. Many of these countries, their share of worldwide birding tourism was either flat or decreasing. Bird capital is not the highest priority for bird watchers. Okay. I know they're just gonna expound further and further on these results, but Venezuela is in a state of unrest and economic disruption, and they may or may not be about to be invaded by the United States. So I can understand why people aren't going to Venezuela given the political and economic instability there. The DRC, from what I remember, is either in a civil war or about to get into a war with some of its neighboring countries like Rwanda again. So I can understand why people don't want to go there, especially when the government partially doesn't control some of the more biodiverse parts of the region. So I feel like yeah, obviously those places will have a large, very high concentration of birds, given that they have wide expanses of tropical rainforests. But like those those countries are not fun or safe or easy to get to, at least depending on what your country of origin is. But yeah, obviously bird capital is not going to be the priority. Safety is probably going to be the priority for freaking bird watchers. I mean, I guess you could probably have bird watching adrenaline junkies. That's actually sounds like a fucking awesome. Like if I could find some bird watching, like some people with hybrid interests like bird watching, but also like skydiving and dangerous tourism, stuff like that. If I could find people with those interests and interview them, I think that would be a great story for the podcast and probably for journalism in general, because that would be really interesting and also pretty funny. That sounds like something that like Channel 5 News would get involved in, where they manage to find people who like go to Afghanistan to like look for this rare bird, or go into the middle of the Congo with like some weird visa to try and just like find all these birds that Euronews wants people to go and find. Oop, that's an ad for personality type. While the total species richness of a country accounted for 22.4% of the tourism variation, its relative global peace index made up 1.4%. Okay, so I guess really the species richness is pretty important. But I guess global peace index would be important too, but I feel like most people just aren't going to risk traveling into the Democratic Republic of the Congo for bird watching. Especially in a place where maybe there isn't that much birdwatching infrastructure. Although I'm not sure, but I know a lot of African nations have a pretty good infrastructure for conservation tourism, because like that's a major source of revenue. But I don't know as much about the Congo, but I know that they're having some pretty serious civil unrest there. So I wouldn't go there to go watch birds. That's all I'm going to say. Taking local and indigenous community perspectives and wishes into account before developing ecotourism, as well as prioritizing long-term sustainability gains over short-term extraction industry profits, are crucial in developing birdwatching tourism facilities as well. Yeah, you know what? I agree with that statement. Unfortunately, it's a weird way to end the article, but this was a weird article anyway, and it was written by Euronews and possibly written by AI. And finally, world's only toxic bird. Why the hooded pitohui is the one bird you should fear. This is from Times Entertainment, from the Times of India. When you think of birds, toxic is rarely the first word that comes to mind. Yet the hooded pitohui de Croce, that's the Latin name, from New Guinea challenges that notion entirely. This striking black and orange bird is one of the few species on Earth known to be poisonous. Handling it can cause numbness, tingling, or even mild paralysis, making it both fascinating and cautionary for scientists and birdwatchers alike. The bird's toxicity was formally documented in a 2009 study led by Dr. Jack Dr. Jack Dumbacher, published in The Auk, which is a famous birding magazine, because the auk was a type of maritime bird, one species of which went extinct about 100 years ago or so. The research confirmed that the hooded pitohui, I'm definitely mispronouncing that, but it's Pitohui, carries the bird carries batrachotoxins, the same potent neurotoxins found in some poison dart frogs. These toxins accumulate in its skin and feathers, providing a natural defense against predators and parasites. Interestingly, the bird doesn't produce the poison itself. It acquires it through its diet, feeding on beetles from the genus Coracine that contain batrachotoxins. Bright plumage warns predators of its danger in a classic example of aposematism, while the hooded pitohui's unique chemistry highlights the intricate relationships between diet, environment, and evolution, demonstrating nature's remarkable adaptations and survival strategies over time. Well, I tell you what, the vocabulary on Times Entertainment is kind of tripping me up. They're using some pretty serious scientific language here. Why it's known as the only toxic bird? Well, you just explained why it's the only toxic bird. Okay. So the skin and feathers are rich in homobatrachotoxin, a neurotoxin capable of causing numbness and tingling when touched. All right, I already saw that. I already read that. Chemical shield, deterring predators. You already said that. Beetles. You already said that. Warning colors. You already said that. Okay. Other toxic birds. Oh, so it's not the only toxic bird. Now that's a plot twist. It's not the only toxic bird. Other toxic birds, like the hooded pitohui. While the hooded pitohui is the most well-known example, it's not the only toxic bird. Fuck's sake. Other species such as the blue-capped Ephrida and the little shrike thrush also carry batrachotoxins. However, the hooded pitohui's distinct plumage, size, and abundance have made it a focus of scientific research and media attention. These birds highlight the rare phenomenon of avian toxicity, which is still not fully understood. Research continues to explore how these species acquire, store, and use toxins, offering insights into the ecological interactions and evolutionary biology. Ooh, here's some fascinating facts about the hooded pitohui. Its habitat is in the rainforest of New Guinea, especially mid-montane regions, which I assume means mid-level altitude on mountains. Diet: beetles from the Coracine genus, occasionally other insects and fruit. Toxin: homobatrachotoxin, a neurotoxin that can cause numbness and tingling. Purpose of toxin: defense. Okay, warning signals: bright and orange plumage. So, if you're in New Guinea, stay away from birds with bright and black and orange. I don't know what bright black is, but bright orange and black plumage. Scientific significance: one of the few known toxic birds in the world. Okay. Why does it matter? More than a curious species, living example of nature's ingenuity, rare opportunity. Okay. But I imagine that they have an ecological role, but yeah, now it's just saying kind of some general stuff about, saving New Guinea's rainforest because they're under pressure from deforestation and human activity. Now, I for one believe that, well, actually, no, orangutans don't live in New Guinea, at least not anymore, I don't think. So I guess, this toxic bird can be a mascot for the rainforest of New Guinea, but I think it's a very biodiverse region, so I think they could find something better than a toxic bird that they write way too many paragraphs about. Oh, and just a shout out for the for our Montana listeners, upland game bird hunting season starts Monday. Or, no, upland game bird hunting season starts on Monday, which is today. So if you're in Montana, you can just start blasting those upland game birds. All right, that was pretty good. Okay, well, I guess I can get right into some quick recommendations, which will lead into talking about the book and the movies that I wanted to talk about today. I guess get out of the way, music. So again, I mentioned last week I was listening to a lot of hip hop. That's true. I can throw out a bunch of different names. I'll probably throw more into the description, but The Alchemist is a good producer. Flying Lotus, great producer and rapper and artist. Kendrick Lamar, of course. Tupac. Notorious. Although I haven't been listening to as much Notorious. I've been listening to a little more Outkast, Andre 3000, and of course Denzel Curry, and Big X The Plug, some more recent one I've been listening to, and as well as some from oh shit, come on man, I can't be allowed to forget the guy. No, I gotta remember. He's the guy that workout. I can't believe I'm blanking on the name of this guy. 7:30. Oh shit. I'm gonna find it. I don't care. I don't care how long it takes or how much I have to edit this. Oh come on, you asshole, Spotify. I wanna see you work out for me, work out for me. Ah! J. Cole. God damn it. Holy shit, that took way too long. So yeah, J. Cole's pretty good. Denzel Curry. I've been listening to some Living Colour as well. Very solid, kind of like rock and funk and metal fusion type band from the 90s. They're pretty good. And some Bob Marley. I've been listening to some reggae. Pepper, that's another reggae band that I've been listening to. They're from the 90s. And Miguel, very good vocalist. So it's music recommendations. TV, I'm still watching The Sopranos. Still watching Alien Earth. I've kind of said most of what I can say about those so far. I'm still kind of in the middling episodes of those. I'm in season 2 of Sopranos. They're still doing some crazy shit. I'll probably, eventually once I finish it, maybe I'll put out an episode from a more full analysis of the show in general. But plenty of people have done that already. But, you know, if I glean something that I find to be unique from the show, then maybe I'll do a full analysis episode. But other than that, it really just is going to come down to literature and movies today. And so I'll start with the literature. I've been looking into, I had to take a pause on the philosophy book that I was reading because it was taking a really long time and I had to return it to my local library. Shout out to local libraries, by the way. I could get on my soapbox about libraries and how important the free and easy access to knowledge is in any given community. But once again, I wouldn't want to get too political, and also that's not what we're talking about today. Today we're talking about schlocky horror bullshit for our schlocky horror Labor Day special. Spooky. Ah! But yeah, I've been reading, or really I just finished. I burned through The Deep by Nick Cutter. Which I found was a pen name for a guy with a really boring British name. I don't believe he's a British author, but hang on, I can pull up his name really quick. Craig Davidson. Yeah. So very boring name. He's Canadian actually. But he apparently writes kind of like more chill stuff under his regular name, and then like just kind of more like run-of-the-mill coming-of-age fiction, and then he writes horror stuff under the Nick Cutter and Patrick Lastuca pen names. But Nick Cutter is the one that he writes most commonly under right now. And he's known for the first novel of his that got a lot of traction was The Troop, which I have yet to read because I couldn't find it nearby. I might have to buy it, although maybe I don't know if I want to buy his books because there may or may not be some controversy around him. I'll have to look into it a little more. But it's normally it's good to buy an author's book. Rather than just try and do like library hunting for it. I mostly do library hunting for either just if I just happen to see the book right on the shelf if I'm at the library anyway, or if it's like an author who's dead, because it's like I don't really care about giving money to their estate, you know. It's like, well, I mean, you know, it's fine, but like I'm not against that, but like I don't see a reason to like go buy like an Edgar Allan Poe, you know, book of stories or whatever, unless you want to look like, you know, all spooky, like spooky. Unless you want to look all like kind of esoteric and well read, because normally it's like a coffee table piece, you know, to be like, oh yes, I love the classics such as Poe and Lord Byron and Mary Shelley and blah 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 blah. But yeah, Nick Cutter is he's definitely a more modern style writer. He's known for being very visceral, having really visceral and oftentimes disgusting descriptions of gore and other maladies in his books, and that definitely comes through in The Deep. His characters are, at least the characters in The Deep, are also relatively well fleshed out. Basically, the short, no spoiler summary of the book is that it's about this guy who gets it's set in the near future where there's a disease called nicknamed the Gets, which is basically like super Alzheimer's. And they don't know, and it affects people of all ages, and they don't know why people are getting it, but it basically just makes you like slowly forget, like basically just Alzheimer's, but just turbocharged, so it happens really fast, and you just, you know, you forget how to have any, you know, you basically forget how to keep yourself alive after like a week or something like that, and so like that's the setting, and they're putting in a lot of resources to try and find a cure, and one of them is like some kind of a top secret mission to find like a cure from like a substance they found at the bottom of the ocean, and the main character is the genius but kind of mad scientist brother is down there, and they get a request to bring our main protagonist Lewis, I believe, and have him come down go down into the depths. Basically, it's like the bottom of the Marianas Trench, or like the bottom of this deep. I don't know if it's the Marianas Trench, but it's a deep undersea trench, and he gets basically requested to go down there because his brother needs him for something. It's kind of a weak premise, where it's like, oh well, the main scientist guy, he's our guy, so we'll get him whatever he needs. If he asks for his random veterinarian brother who hates him and they don't really like each other, then we'll get him for no reason, no questions asked. We're already spending $1 trillion on this. Why not throw another variable in there? And so, you know, it's one of those books where you do have to kind of suspend your disbelief a little bit, because it's a case where it's like an author without like a significant science background kind of just sort of goes in and tries to just like, you know, put their story into a scientific setting, but you know, not knowing as much about the science as you would want to make like the setting really realistic, right? But basically, you know, you just suspend your disbelief. It's most of the book it's really about the characters, and about like past traumas, and about monsters, and about your inner demons, and about outer demons, and about disease, and about forgetting, and about life, and about family, and about that. And so that's that's where the main issues of the novel come in, because it seems almost like the author had like kind of a good idea for like a setup for the story, but then just put like 12 different horror ideas into it at once. Um, because from what I remember, the troop is a pretty straightforward like zombie slash survival horror type of plot. But and this one gets very strange because it has elements of like, I kind of thought it was going to be more of like a semi-realistic science fiction-y type of horror going into it, and then it kind of just it gets into like it gets into weird stuff, and it's like it comes in a way that it's not entirely expected, but then it gets a little bit formulaic around the middle where you're like, oh, I feel like I kind of know where this is going. I sort of hope there's a twist, otherwise it's just like, this sort of trope that's in um, a lot of horror novels, particularly cosmic horror. There are elements of cosmic horror in it. I don't want to spoil too much, but kind of once you're in the plot, you kind of like, and you pick up little details that are in there. You go like, oh, this is the type of thing that we're doing. Um, but then it kind of switches halfway through from it being like, oh, from you're thinking it's going to be like a psychological horror where it's like, oh, you're not really sure what's in this guy's head and what's real, and you don't know, like, oh, is it just influence? Is there just some sort of weird influence thing where it's like all this stuff in this guy's imagination is like coming to get him in this claustrophobic space, or not coming to get him, but it's affecting him and causing him to hallucinate. Essentially, you're kind of thinking it's that, but then it's like around around halfway through, it's like, oh, but this is actually, there's kind of no indication that it's like actually just in his head, and there's just so much stuff thrown in. Like, I mean, I guess if you're just like a fan of just gore and like uncomfortable shit and just scary thing after scary thing, then if you like your horror novels jam packed with horror, you're going to like this. If you like kind of like a plot that builds dread at least for a while, you'll definitely like the first half. But if you want like a plot that really, where you don't see everything coming, and that kind of like makes sense with it, like logically, and kind of like within the logic of the world, and within like, having kind of consistency in the story and things like that, then you're gonna find some flaws. But I still finished it really fast because it was a very engaging read. I did want to know what was gonna happen next, up to a point. There was eventually a point where I was like, I don't know, but I feel like I kind of know what's going to happen here, and I don't like. I guess I'll read through to the end, but I mean, it's a lot stranger than it lets on. I remember I had this book on my reading list since probably like 2019, and that's how long it takes to get through my reading list. By the way, it is a pain in the ass because I had a bunch of fantasy series on there, and I kept getting sidetracked with other books, and by long stretches of not reading anything at all. Um, but I initially had worried that it would be like kind of boring because it seemed like, oh man, freaking, there's a disease. It's just going to be sad because it's going to be talking about this turbo-Alzheimer's, and then it's going to be this guy trapped in the bottom of the ocean. And it's going to be psychological. But at the very least, it was not boring. I read some reviews afterwards. They were like, "Ooh, it's kind of a slog." It's not really a slog. You always kind of want to know what's going to happen next, um, even as it seems like, oh, like I kind of know what's going to happen. But it's good. It's overall it's pretty good. It's tense, so I'd still recommend it. It's not a fucking forget about it type of book, especially if you like very descriptive and colorful writing styles, for writing horrible things. Then you'll absolutely enjoy The Deep. So that's good. That's out of the way. I just yeah, I don't know. I just I don't know, maybe I'll get into some more spoilers for it another time. But for now, I'll just I'll recommend it. Maybe if I get into a discussion about this book with another person, I'll talk about it more. But just for now, read it, and if you want to discuss it later, shoot me an email or leave a comment or something. What else do we have? Right, but the movies that I watched. So here's a little quick bit of context. I'm trying to finish up all of the movies that I have on my watch list in my Shudder account, because Shudder has increased their monthly subscription price, and I want to get rid of it so I can kind of make room for a different subscription that I want to get for sports and shit. But yeah, it was a little bit slow going, but the other weekend I got 2 movies done. I'd have to just pull that up. Blah 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 blah. That's the problem. I need to keep things on separate documents, because otherwise I'm just out here just running a bunch of crap. Right. Okay. So, the first movie that I watched was this was kind of a bizarre one, but it was not bizarre in an interesting way. It was bizarre in a boring way, and it's called "The Rats Are Coming. The Werewolves Are Here." That would be "The Rats Are Coming, comma, the Werewolves Are Here!" exclamation mark. This is from 1973. And overall, it's not very interesting as a movie. It's a British-American enterprise. The director is American, and all the actors are less well-known British actors. And it's really just kind of a play on the House of Usher with like a kind of degenerating family, except you really just don't give a fuck about any of them. And it's just like, everything is shot just in this fucking dreary-ass house. And it's a lot of the characters just saying the same like ominous shit over and over again. And it's like, and the problem is that, the way they've re-released it for streaming and things like that, like you know what the twist is already. Like even in the title, it's like there's werewolves in it somewhere. There's rats are involved too. Rats aren't really involved that much, except in one case there is a very real scene of a woman torturing a live mouse, and that was pretty horrible to watch. But that's kind of like that's kind of a staple of this director, Andy Milligan, and he's honestly far more interesting than the movie. Because like I said, the movie is just House of Usher, except the Ushers are just a bunch of shitty werewolves that can't actually even kill anybody except each other. And then it's like, oh, the youngest daughter of the werewolf family harbors a terrible secret, but it's always just like, the rest of it is just the fucking old-ass dad talking about his experiments and how this family will not survive if it isn't made to be healthy through the offspring, and we cannot take the chances. And it's just boring. It was just boring, and then like interspersed with a couple of scenes of animal cruelty, and then some kind of lackluster kills near the very end. But luckily it wasn't a total loss, because I got to learn about Andy Milligan. And Andy Milligan is known as like just very much a exploitation film director. He got his start in the late 60s and 70s, basically just making films that no one would just distribute anywhere except in like very underground theater spaces and in like CD video stores and stuff like that. About half of his films are considered lost films, so they just ended up either they got finished or partly finished, and they just didn't make any copies, or stuff that was just like so crappy that the producer just burned it, or it was like so like strange and bizarre they just burned it. Which is very, very interesting, because most lost films I found, or that I kind of researched the history of lost film, but most are from the silent era, because they literally just, there weren't VHSs. There wasn't a good way for people to, watch things on home video. So sometimes just to save space, they would literally just burn. They would just burn all their reels so they could make room for more reels in warehouse storage. Um, and so that's a good chunk of the reason why a lot of lost films are lost today. But Andy Milligan's were unique in that it was in a kind of more modern context, and it's usually harder to lose films, but still almost half of his filmography was lost in one way or another. But he was a very interesting guy. He had kind of like a troubled working class upbringing. He also had a troubled upbringing in the sense that he was relatively openly gay man in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, which, as you might know if you know your history, was not a great time to be different in any way from the societal norm. And so, obviously, he had a relatively hard life. But he was also apparently a very rather disturbed guy. He was into a lot of kind of weird fetishy sex stuff. He hung out in sex shops and BDSM dungeons and things like that. And he incorporated a lot of that stuff into his film work. Basically just making a lot of uncomfortable sex scenes for everyone involved. For example, hiring gay actors to do to simulate straight sex in movies and things like that, and just very bizarre choices that made him kind of difficult to work with, but sometimes produced some very interesting and bizarre scenes. One of his first ever films that we know about was literally just a 40-minute movie about men getting uncomfortable with each other and having kind of a strange, awkward sexual tension in a bathhouse. And then from there he just he started just delving into this insane shock exploitative horror stuff, usually involving kind of the underground sex world of New York, and sometimes in the UK when he didn't want to live or direct stuff in the United States. But yeah, he ended up making a lot of different movies. And of course, I had to catch one of the more boring ones in The Rats Are Coming, The Werewolves Are Here, which even by the standards of his movies was generally considered pretty bad and not very interesting. But he had a lot of different films that he made up until his death in the 1990s. And there's my main research that I have from this was this. Actually, let me pull it up. Yeah, so pulling up my research here, a lot of it was from one or two old old horror movie forums / websites / distributors. One of them is Cinephere Video, which is made by this this guy who's obviously pretty well versed in film, or at least in underground horror films, but he's also the guy who made the website, or that writes things for the website. He's also weird pervert and bigot who just talks a lot about I'm pushing the envelope, I'm making things that I like, not stuff that the wussy sanitized Hollywood world wants to make. And yeah, he makes an article that's supposed to be supposedly kind of respectful and a tribute to Andy Milligan, but also calls him the F slur multiple times, which kind of definitely dates this website. It was apparently, I did a little research. Cinephere Video was made in the late 90s, and so it's this at this point middle-aged guy, and he's definitely has a rather kind of warped view about about sexual orientations and things like that. But that was where a lot of the information I had on Andy Milligan came from. But yeah, it's very interesting discography. he had a couple of different movies. Well, had some of them. Like I said, a lot of them were lost, but then he had a lot of different stuff that just had like some had artsy names like Vapors. That was the one about the bathhouse. But then he had stuff that was just called like Torture Dungeon. It seemed like kind of his more well-made like artistic movies for in the late '60s and like early '70s. But kind of once he like after like 1970 or so, it was kind of like things kind of went downhill because he didn't really have a lot of money. His shady producers kept fucking him over, and he was just mostly just hiring a lot of pornographic actors and things like that. Because like they had Guru the Mad Monk seemed like the last one that was supposed to be like kind of fun. Because a lot of them were just ended up just being kind of like bullshit, either smut or like mock snuff films type of thing. Like for example, Fleshpot on 42nd Street. Now that's a that is a very bizarre and smutty title. But then sometimes there's just like his last 5 movies were just like really phoning in. Like 1974, Blood, 1983, Carnage. Between 1974 and 1983, no films that we have copies of. 1988, Monstrosity. 1989, Weirdo. Although I guess that one's called one of his most heartfelt creations. But yeah, there's always weird stuff about usually about like handicapped people getting like beaten up, and it's like there's always strange shit. His last film was in 1989 called Surgikill, which is literally just about stabbing just killer doctors and shit, and just a bunch of crap. And they had a lot of movies that were lost, like a couple from mostly late 60s and 70s. He kind of dropped off in film proliferation after about 1973, 1974. But yeah, I might try and watch one of these other movies in the future because some of them seem straight up bizarre and interesting. But the rats are coming, the werewolves are here. Not one of them. Which brings me to a movie that actually that really brought me out of that slump, because in comparison it's a masterpiece, and that is a Canadian horror film, I guess sci-fi horror, called The Brain, which was released in 1988. So The Brain was directed by a Canadian guy, I'd assume he's Canadian because the movie is produced by Canadians. Canadian guy named Edward Hunt. I don't really know if he had a lot of other movies. Yeah, he had a lot of kind of like 80s schlock stuff, some stuff in the 70s, but he seemed definitely more of a sci-fi horror director. But yeah, The Brain is basically about an alien creature that looks like a brain that a mad psychologist is using to brainwash people and control their minds in a small town. And a giant brain-like alien that mentally enslaves the town's residents. My computer is running really slowly, and that's really annoying. Town is unnamed, but you could assume it's in Canada, but I think it's kind of, it could be in Canada, or it could just be like out in the Midwest in the winter, like especially somewhere up in like Wyoming or Minnesota or something like that. The only thing is that they don't really have towns that big in Wyoming or Minnesota, but it's very obviously in Canada somewhere, because it just looks like the Great White North. There's snow on the ground the whole time. Even though I don't think it's that late in the season. So it's very obviously in Canada, but I don't know if it's set in Canada or set in the US or whatever. But it doesn't matter, because the point is there's a bizarre brain-looking creature with big teeth and a big weird tongue that's just a giant puppet that, it starts as a puppet, and then I believe it's just like literally just like a painted big sheet of fabric with like dudes like walking behind it to move it back and forth. I think it's literally just like a billboard that they start pushing back and forth of like a puppet mouth. And so I guess just a big puppet either way. They just make the puppet bigger over time as the brain gets bigger. But yeah, the only thing that can stop this brain is a smart but mischievous and prankster high school teenager, played by Tom Bresnahan, who I'll get into a bit. They of course, for some reason, they make his name like way more complicated than it needed to be. Like you could have called him anything. You could have been like, I guess maybe it's supposed to be like, I guess it's supposed to be in like the Midwest or something, so everyone's like Polish or like like Norwegian or North European or something like that, because the character's name is Jim Majalusk, and I don't even know if that's like a name. I don't know if that's a real name. It could be some sort of Polish name or some sort of like Eastern European name, but I don't know. It doesn't really sound like anything, but they make sure that you know his full name to make it seem more real or something. But anyway, it's like the plot, there's I recommend that you watch this movie either way. The plot is really simple. It's really, the only reason you should watch this movie is for the bizarre visuals of both the brain and the characters within. But yeah, basically this psychologist uses his like public access TV show to brainwash a bunch of people in the town. And the realm is that the brain creature that he's using to send out these like psychic messages is also like evil and hungry, and so it causes hallucinations in people, and sometimes straight up eats people, but then also sometimes just makes them kill other people and then themselves, or just like, I don't know, psychically throws them around. It's not super clear exactly how the thing works, but sometimes it just like sends psychic messages. I think it can send psychic messages through the TV, but it can also control people through proximity, but it can also just eat you or grab you and eat you. It doesn't really, there's not, once again, this is another movie where there's not a lot of consistency across the board. But yeah, the point is that this teenage guy, he's I guess like kind of smart enough where he's generally resistant to the psychic control, and so he just kind of has the hallucinations. And he gets put into the program briefly by his school because he puts fucking, somehow he just found a pure sodium at the prank store in a jar that says pure sodium, and throws it into the toilets to make the toilets explode. And I think in real life, like, I thought it was going to make the toilet explode because that's what it would do. Like, you put sodium directly into water and it creates an explosion. But instead of that, it just kind of makes the water start blasting out of like the toilets and out of the water fountain and stuff, and it just makes his teacher and his principal mad, and so they send him off to the freaking psychologist guy. And the psychologist guy tries to control him using the brain thing, but instead he just has hallucinations of the doctor's assistant, like topless or whatever. And yeah, there's a couple, it's like the main excuse to have like topless woman in the movie because there's like nothing else going on otherwise. And it's basically just to keep things from getting particularly boring. They're like, we only have one monster puppet and we don't have any other good way to do hallucinations. So we'll just have female characters get naked and have that be the hallucination. And then that can be it. But yeah, basically he's like tells his friends, and it's like they believe him, but like no one else around town believes him because as it turns out, they've all been brainwashed. And the main villains are of course the brain, and then the psychologist, Dr. Anthony Blakely. But then there's also this orderly guy, an orderly, like a psych nurse at the hospital, and that's a bizarre name. But yeah, there's the orderly is called Verna, played by George Buza, who's a guy who I think he was I guess he voiced it. He voiced Beast in some of the X-Men TV shows. And I think I recognize him in a couple other things. Apparently, he was in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the TV series, and then has like a couple other little roles, and was also in A Christmas Horror Story. Oh my God, I remember that. Sorry to get on a tangent, but I remember this movie. It's called A Christmas Horror Story, and it's literally about Santa Claus fighting Krampus, where Krampus is his brother or something. But then this guy, George Buza, I knew I recognized him from somewhere. He kind of looks a little like Santa Claus now. But yeah, he fights Krampus in that. But in this movie, he plays the psychotic, obese psych. I think he was obese for the time. Like, he looked really fat. He's just a violent, crazy guy who's just, I guess, is basically just the lackey for Dr. Blakely. Or Blake? Dr. Blake? Dr. Blakely? It says Blakely in one thing, it says Blake in the Wikipedia. And I don't remember the movie, so I didn't write it down. But yeah, I think that probably some of the best scenes in the movie are with Verna, because the brain itself, it's a creepy face thing. It's got big teeth, and it's got like a weird like puppet tongue that comes out and can grab people and eat them. But other than that, it doesn't really move around very much. They don't just have it out in the open, because I imagine if you get an open shot of it, then you could probably see the crew's legs working beneath to like move the thing around, because it's a big like puppet that's just like a facade, I think. It's like a facade with like a working mouth, and that's about it. But it looks pretty good for the first half of the movie, and it kind of just gets more like kind of rubbery looking as time goes on. I imagine it started to get kind of worn out and dingy as they continued to shoot, which is too bad. But that's where Verna comes in, because he's this big fat psycho guy. He basically ends up killing a lot of people, and then because the whole town is brainwashed, they blame it on poor Jim Majalewski. It's again bizarre name, but that's what they gave him. They gave him that name, Jim. Anyway. But yeah, this Verna guy, he's really fat, but they make him run so much in this movie. they make him sprint after the characters with a gun multiple times. And he's really bad at shooting, of course. Like all villains in these low budget movies are really bad at shooting, because you only have so many characters and you only have so many special effects. So you can't have a lot of hits happen. But he's constantly running, and he has the most insane looking run form ever, where he just has his hands like firmly at his sides, and gets like his knees up, and he's just pumping his arms as hard as he can as he runs. And it's this big fat, he's got to be like 260 or something like that at least. Like, he's got a huge gut, and but he's getting those knees up. Like, he's sprinting so hard in some of these scenes, where it's like he's really giving it his all, because it's not like jump cuts. You just have these long cuts of this guy pretending to run fast, where he's really just pumping his knees up in a way that probably really tires him out. And then later on, in order to fill time, they pretend that the building that they're in, which of course is like one of the main sets in the whole movie, one of like 3 sets, and they have this stairwell, and apparently Jim's really good at like getting away and like hiding in different places, and apparently it's a really difficult building to navigate, because this henchman Verna, he has to keep running up and down these steps, and that's where the jump cuts come in, because it's this big fat guy just motoring his way up and down these stairs over and over again for probably like 10 minutes. Because at this point, it's the end of the movie. They need to get to like 90 minutes to make it a feature film, so they can get it into theaters or get like, whatever they need to sell this thing. And and yes, it's just 10 minutes of poor John Buza or George Buza having to just run up and down these stairs with a little fake gun in his hand, wearing this stupid like hospital orderly's outfit that he's just been wearing for the past like what 36 hours in movie. So he probably smells like shit. He's got this gun. He's trying to find this kid. He keeps having to go up and down stairs, which he does not seem qualified to do. Um, and then I believe at the end he eventually just he gets killed by literally just he literally just walks in front of the hallway, or he just walks in front of the brain at the wrong time. And the brain is it's just, even though it's this hyper intelligent psychic being, it's just so hungry it just eats whatever is in front of him, and he just gets it just runs into him. Like, he just have this, once again, literally just this giant facade puppet face just slam into him and push him against the wall and then pretend to eat him. And just having this big mouth just go up and down, and him going and it's like the mouth is so huge it should be able to just bite a head off immediately, or like literally at towards the end of the movie it's like big enough it could just bite even this big fat dude in half, but they can't actually do that, so they just have it go chomping on him, just, and then they have all like the red rags on him to show that like, oh, there's blood and stuff, it's so gruesome. But yeah, it's the visuals, it's the silly visuals that make this movie and just the batshit plot. Because everything else, all the characters, they're all just like Canadian, they're just, B-list or like D-list stock horror movie characters. You got like although I will say, for authenticity's sake, all the cops in this like rural-ish, Midwestern or like Western Canadian town, they're all fat as fuck. They're all every single cop, there isn't a single cop. Number one, all the cops are like assholes. They're violent, and they're all just like big fat middle-aged guys who just hate all the teenagers and just love going around just shooting random people, and they're all brainwashed, so it's perfect. They're just there, and yeah. So A for authenticity there, but yeah, it's the visuals that make this movie, and the beginning is kind of intriguing, but it turns into kind of like a nothing movie. But it's all spectacle. It's all spectacle, no substance, but that's better than the rats are coming, the werewolves are here, where it's no spectacle and no substance. So, yeah, I recommend watching The Brain, whatever way you can. I imagine there's a Criterion Collection DVD, like physical media for it, if you're into that. If not, it's probably streaming on like Tubi somewhere. You probably don't have to get a Shudder account for it. But if you can get to it somehow, I recommend watching it. It's pretty quick. I think it's literally like right on the 90-minute mark, and yeah, it's just fun schlock fest. You don't really got to think about it too much. One thing I did want to mention about the lead actor, Tom Bresnahan, who played Jim Majalewski. He went on, he didn't really go into, I don't think he did a lot of other movies. I'll pull him up just a second. Actor. Yeah, I think he was really just he was in The Brain. He was in a couple other things. He was in The Kingdom, which I guess is another movie. Oh, it's about I guess some type of war movie. And so I guess he's in there in a supporting role somewhere. And then he's in Amazing Stories, some sort of TV show, and then a couple of other little schlock horror movies as well. But the main thing that he's known for is The Brain, which kind of sucks. But the thing about him is funny is that he has his own website now, because he is like a self-help guru for young men, and he has a book called Take Back Control: 5 Critical Steps You Must Apply to Take Back Control from Your Troubled Teen to 20s Son Now. And number one, that concept is crazy. take back control. It's like, you're a parent, you should have like control anyway. I don't know what Tom Bresnahan is going to be able to tell you. But also it says teen to 20s. Also, that's the title. Like that title, that's the subtitle. 5 critical steps you must apply to take back control from your troubled teen to 20s son now. If your son's in his 20s, like he's an adult. that's an adult. Like 18-year-olds are adult, but in your 20s, they're like, take back control, ground your 25-year-old son. That's crazy shit right there. Like, just kick him out and make him get a job. Like, it's like, why would you need something for like your 20-year-old adult son? In this book, you will learn the real reason why approaches you have tried have not worked or only to an extent. All right, this guy's not a good writer. What needs to change in order for your teen to 20 son to experience lasting change? Yeah, this is bullshit. This is like an AI wrote this. But yeah, this is literally the guy because it looks exactly like the guy. It's Tom Bresnahan from the movie, except he's like in his 40s or 50s now. But yeah, he said he was a struggling young man, and then he went into Hollywood. He went into Hollywood for a while, and he was like, I didn't know who I was back then. But I find it ironic because the only theme that you could possibly glean from the brain is like, how bad and controlling like certain institutions can be, where it's like, oh man, it's like sometimes the youth are right, and it's good to like take a stand against like what the what the mainstream media says, and like, because all the media and everything, it's all controlled by something malignant that's trying to like take from you. Sort of like, stuff that kind of can relate to real life a little bit, but it's a very anti-authoritarian theme, and Tom Bresnan played a very anti-authority character. He played like the prankster kid who ends up being a hero in the end. But now he's just like, now he's being like a self-help guru, and he's like, how to stamp down these willful young men. So he's just become like the psychologist guy. He's become the Dr. Blakely, except he definitely does not have a doctorate or a MD or any sort of license. Maybe he has a license, but to me, he really just seems like a self-help author who may or may not be credited in any way. Yeah, he's just like, oh man, look at this giant bio. Mentorship, early years, talk therapy, later investing, cutting edge, addiction recovery, earning effective approaches. Okay, so basically he's just like, I had issues with addiction and being a rambunctious young man, and now I'm going to help you tell your rambunctious young man. Like, why is it through like the parents? Like, what, like, is he really, if he resolved this as an adult, shouldn't he be just doing self-help directly as an adult to other adults? Instead of being like, here, parents, tell your 22-year-old college-age son what to do. Take control. It's like, yeah, that's some crazy shit. Maybe the actual content of the book is more coherent, but it seems like some weird like self-help parenting bullshit, and it's for like an audience that really shouldn't exist, because it's like trying to take control of your your son who's in their 20s. Like, that's batshit. But hey, damn, Tom Bresnahan, you lived long enough to become the villain, basically the villain of the brain. Although, I guess if he hated being in the fucking brain, then maybe he really wanted to become like a Dr. Blake Lively. I just think it's ironic. He should have a public access television show. Maybe it'll finally go national. That was from the movie, by the way. That would have only been funny if you've seen The Brain, which I recommend you do. But yeah, that's about all I have for today. Once again, make sure to reach out at OTNT podcast on Instagram, Mastodon, Blue Sky, and YouTube. I believe that's also It's also otntpodcast@gmail.com is the business email if you want to contact me for, advertising opportunities of any kind. And, yeah, I'll talk to you next time. Got some interesting topics coming up soon. Hopefully, should have some new guests coming in the not too distant future. I think that the guest format works pretty well. Although sometimes I get really solid solo topics like today. But yeah, hopefully we'll have another guest soon, and I hope that you will continue to listen. So yeah, thanks for listening. Goodbye.